Electric vehicles aren't the future. They're here now. More than 1 million EVs were sold in the United States last year, and they're being built right here in your own backyard. The EV industry and battery supply chain has already created 27,000 jobs in Georgia, bringing billions of dollars of investment into our local communities. From West Point to Covington to Ella Bell, all while strengthening America's manufacturing leadership. When you think of good jobs, strong communities, and made in Georgia, think EVs. Learn more and get on board at zeta.org/join.
Is shopping for health coverage confusing? Georgia's got you covered. Georgia Access is our state's program for all residents to find quality, affordable health insurance. At georgiaaccess.gov, you can explore a variety of plan options. You may even qualify for no-cost coverage. Open enrollment is happening now. Visit georgiaaccess.gov today. Georgia Access. Health insurance the Georgia way.
Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/podcast.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Ranks Squad, and welcome to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC. My name's Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today. And joining me across the water in San Diego, Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yeah, I'm good. Obviously, been a busy couple of days over here in America. There's been some sort of vote going on or some poll or something. I don't know what all that's about. But nevertheless, I'm still here, just watching loads of Champions League, cracking on as normal. So I've just been in my own little world, mate.
The only voting I've been doing is for Player of the Match week.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. In terms of the Champions League, mate, only one team retains their perfect record so far. Liverpool, give yourselves a round of applause. 12 points out of 12.
Well, I was going to say this to you because I don't remember exactly when it was, but definitely this season on a Champions League takeaway, you open the show by being like, the Premier League sides are running away with it. They're dominant in Europe. And look, they're still doing okay, but ultimately a tough week for the Champions League, Premier League sides. Liverpool obviously won and won very comfortably, and we'll talk about them in a second. But losses for Villa, losses for City, and a loss for Arsenal as well. It all looks a little bit less rosy from your Premier League perspective.
Results-wise, yeah. I would say that two of those three teams deserved results that they didn't get. So, I wouldn't. I don't really buy into results when it comes to football, Jack. I buy into narratives.
You've always been an XG man, so I've always said that about you. I always said that about you. Look, normally on this show, we'd start with the action that happened on Wednesday. It's the freshest. It's just been what we're watching. But I think the headlines this week, Dean, are for Tuesday's action. So we're actually going to flip this. Do Tuesday in part one and then Wednesday in part two. And with that, I think we should get going because there's loads to talk about. And I'm going to hand it over to you to start with maybe the most shock result of the entire week. Sporting and Ruben Amorim, who is the new Manchester United manager, beating Manchester City 4-1 at the Jose Alvalade.
Yeah, it's a mad result. No doubts about that. And it certainly makes his appointment at Man United a lot more interesting as he now prepares to get started at Old Trafford. And United fans obviously will be very excited about what he's achieved here. So that's a nice narrative, definitely to look forward to. In terms of the game itself, was it a 4-1 game? No, it wasn't a 4-1 game. It was a great game plan from Amorim. He absolutely nailed it. But I don't think that Pep Guardiola will be overly concerned about the level of performance. I think there are elements of the City's play and form at the moment that he should be concerned about. But I wouldn't look at this and think, oh, hold on, they just lost to Bournemouth as well, and it's the same thing as that. And then they lost to Tottenham before that. It's like, okay, well, Tottenham was their B team, and it kind of felt like he was willing to take that loss. And so, look, I'm not going to beat around, but obviously 3 defeats in a row is basically unprecedented under Pep. I don't know if we've ever seen that, to be honest. The Bournemouth game was a bad performance from City, and they absolutely deserved to lose, probably by more than 2-1. This game, I didn't feel was quite like that, and I thought
probably should have ended 5-5.
Yeah, this is the thing. Like, City did still dominate the ball. They had 20 shots compared to Sporting's 9. They had 11 corners. They were as good as Sporting. The problem they had was that Amorim had them in a situation. It's actually quite funny because I saw a journalist said afterwards to Pep, were you surprised that Sporting, once they were in front, they didn't just sit back? They actually just kept looking for more goals. And Pep was like, they did sit back. And the guy's like, no, they kept going and looking to score. Pep was like, no, their transitions were very strong. Their transitions were great, but they sat back. Like, they absolutely sat back, but they just...
Naturally.
Yeah, but Pep was like, you're wrong, basically. Like, what you're saying is wrong because they did sit back, but they had that was part of a plan that they executed perfectly. They were... How would I describe what they did? When they won the ball back, they were like really stable in their emotions in terms of like...
It wasn't crazy football.
It wasn't crazy football. They made calm, calculated decisions, which probably are as a result of clear messaging from the manager. And they were also very strong physically in their intent to get to where they wanted to be. I thought that the way that they played from that goal that they scored from kickoff at the start of the second half was just outstanding, to be honest. And it's a lot of bravery on the ball that they show. I mean, Man United fans, if you want to look at one moment from this game that should give you real hope for the future, it's just the way that this ball from kickoff goes back into the defence. And I think it's Diamonde gets the ball and rather than just shift it out wide or even worse, as you would probably see at Man United, turn around and just pass it back to the goalkeeper, the immediate move is to just pass straight through the Man City midfield. And like, there's 2 players right there that if the pass isn't perfect, cut it out and you're in big trouble. The brave pass, though, is to go between them, then move wide, then have some runners off the ball. And it just starts to open up because City aren't expecting them to try to play with such intent, especially obviously like fresh off half time. So that moment, it's funny actually, because Arsenal tried something like this tonight as well, where there was like almost a set piece routine from kickoff. It is something we're seeing more of, where teams are seeing it actually as an opportunity to set something up these days. So
saw a lot from Brentford, right? A couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. So this is definitely a trend that's growing in the game anyway. But to have defined movements and intent from a position like that, I thought was a real warning sign for City. And it was the real moment when they were completely cut apart. Obviously, 2 of the goals end up being from penalty kicks. So take for that what you will. Is it deserved or not, they're still just penalties. So that can happen. At some point, you do get...
One of them is definitely a penalty. The other one is slightly more questionable, but I still probably think it's an absolutely fair thing to give.
Yeah. But overall, mate, I would say that the first half performance was good from Man City.
Yeah.
And I'd say that the overall performance was quite good. Okay. I saw a few tweets after talking about, because I didn't watch this one live, and so it was before I'd watched it, and it was like, City are washed up. Like, this is the beginning of the end of this team. How do they rebuild and all this sort of stuff? They need signings in January, etc., etc. And then I saw Bernardo give an interview in which he describes City as being in a dark place right now. I was like, wow, I need to watch this. And I saw the game. I was like, okay, well, yeah.
Pep disagreed with Bernardo
Pep
after that.
did disagree, yeah. Pep strongly disagreed with the fact that they were in a dark place right now. He's like, no. I don't agree with that. And then he went further. It's like, he was pushed a bit on the situation they're in. If Pep was like, if you think I'm giving up right now, no, I'm not giving up. In fact, I want moments like this. I want to be challenged. And that's what I'm most intrigued by right now, I think. How do City cope with this challenge? Because they've got players in there that you wonder what their motivation levels can be like at this stage after everything that they've achieved. You've got players on contracts that are starting to wind down, say whether it's De Bruyne, whether it's Gundogan coming back on a 1 year and all these sorts of things. Pep himself still hasn't committed. We don't know exactly what's going to happen there. And when you've had so much success again and again and again, you know, even coming into this season, we're like, how do they even motivate themselves? But they got straight on with things. Now we'll really see, won't we, exactly what they're made of, what Pep's made of. Obviously, he had a little word with Amorim at full time, and I'd love to know exactly what was said because Amorim's face afterwards was a bit of a picture. So I'd love to know exactly what messaging has been exchanged between those two. But to be honest, mate, this just makes the season way more exciting, doesn't it? Man City go to Brighton next in the Premier League. The next Champions League match is a home fixture to Feyenoord, which you would expect them to be okay in. But at the moment, when they're on this wobble, 3 losses in a row, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen?
Brighton and Tottenham are 2 interesting fixtures. Now, obviously, there's an international break in the middle of them, so that kind of resets it a little bit. But Brighton and the way that they played at Liverpool at the weekend, if they come out like that again and they're that brave again, you can see them causing City problems. I mean, I agree with quite a lot of your, so the things you've come to, the conclusions you've come to on this game. And I do think you're right that City could have been 3-4-0 up before Sporting got a foothold, right? But I do still think they're incredibly easy to play through at the moment. And I think that it goes further back than these 3 losses. Yes, they have that big win over Sparta Prague, take from that what you win in the Champions League. But you kind of look back before that. They made loads of chances in the Southampton game, but actually they only won 1-0. And yes, and afterwards you kind of hear Pep coming out, and we know that that's a thing that he speaks about other teams. Bernardo did it as well and spoke about Southampton in really glowing terms. And that's one thing, but they struggled a little bit against Wolves in the game before that one. They struggled a fair bit against Fulham in transition in the game that they won 3-2 before that one. The one before that in the Premier League is the Newcastle 1-1 draw, which was a fairly even game and a fairly even result, I think. The 2-2 before that is against Arsenal, with Arsenal having 10 men and, yes, all right, digging in, fine. And then there was the game against Brentford, which they weren't completely at the races at either. I do wonder if there is something a little bit longer in this that you can look at as more of a trend, in that City just feel really easy to cut open. And that is the real worry. You speak about that pass, which I think you're absolutely right to do, that cuts them through the middle. Doesn't happen if Rodri's on the pitch. It just doesn't. And I think that whilst it's a little bit reductive to say that, Rodri's out, therefore City can't function, I don't think it's quite that. They just haven't found the way of switching that around yet that means that everything is working in tandem. And yes, there's 2 penalties here, but also it comes from someone getting in behind a defender twice in a row, on either side of the pitch. Gvardiol's one is a little bit clumsy, I think, on Trincao. And then the penalty at the end, you're sort of like, how are they in behind so often? And yes, that was part of Sporting's plans, part of their transition. And I thought it was interesting that Amorim came out afterwards and spoke about this and said, look, Manchester United, you can't play in the same way as this. And I was like, well, you can against Man City. The problem for Manchester United has been that they've kind of only had one way of playing. And, when they were in transition, let's say under Ole, they were really good against big teams, but they couldn't break down teams who sat in front of them. I think that actually if Amorim can carry one thing in that makes him different and makes him more likely to be a success at Manchester United, and again, no manager is a silver bullet, but if it's one thing he can carry in, it's his ability with this Sporting side to play in different ways, because they don't have trouble breaking down teams that sit in low blocks in front of them. But equally, they can play in transition when they need to. And I think if he can carry that, then United are in a much better place than they were before his appointment, because it's not one-dimensional. And that's something that United have been for a long, long time. So I think that Sporting were good here. I think that there were value enough for a win. Like I say, I think it could have been a draw, but I don't think it was one that City deserved to blow them away in either, especially given the character that they showed from going 1-0 down so early on to bounce back. And I think the City do have problems. I don't think it's maybe as dark as some people are making out. And like you say, that tweet's a bit mad. But I do think that they have problems, and I do think they're going to need to solve them pretty quickly if they're going to turn this around.
Yeah, look, we've seen all season that you can score against Man City, and that is obviously worrying. Like, whoever you are, you can go to the Etihad and you can get a goal. We've seen it week after week after week. So certainly the elite teams should be looking at Sporting and saying, we can't just score one. We can do what we want if we properly have a go at them. Maybe they are living to regret the fact that they didn't properly bolster up this squad in the summer. I think there's definitely an element of that. I don't think Gundogan and Savio, I didn't at the time think it was okay. And I think that there's definitely a sense that this is light. And I think that there is a sense of just keeping the squad on their toes and just pushing them on a little bit. And I don't think that exists right now. I thought Akanji was poor here. There is one moment in particular when Gyökeres runs off him and Akanji seems a bit lifeless, to be honest. Obviously, you've got a young kid in the back line as well. He's not going to be helped by a moment like that. So, yeah, there are definitely flaws. And I don't want to completely cover up all of their flaws here, but I just don't think this was quite as bad as it might look on a scoreline.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, I would love to pan that, but I think really similarly about the game I'm going to speak about next. So I think we should move on to it because Liverpool are the only team that seem to have any consistency at the moment. They won 4-0 against Bayer Leverkusen. I tweeted earlier, I was like, this is such a weird season. It was after the Villa result, but more the Villa performance. And actually what we saw on Tuesday was a lot of results going against the kind of grain that you would expect. I think we've kind of seen it all season. It's quite hard to analyze because no one really feels like they have any consistency apart from Liverpool, right? So this is it. And the headline is obviously Luis Diaz. But once again, Arne Slot has Liverpool absolutely turning the screw in the second half. And I really loved his post-match comments. He's brilliant at coming out and explaining exactly what he's done. And I think it's because he doesn't have any fear that it's going to be used against him, right? And because this Leverkusen shape seemed to flummox Liverpool a bit in the first half. They played with Boniface basically as a left midfielder. They overloaded the midfield, didn't really play with a striker, utilised a sort of a 4-4-2 out of possession, left that centre-forward position unoccupied when they did have the ball. And it really did just seem to confuse everyone a little bit. But again, Slot pulls out those tactical shifts in the second half and they step on the gas and they show their credentials. And it didn't even come by subs this time, right? Like in the Arsenal game, but a couple of subtle tweaks and they absolutely blow Leverkusen away in the second 45 minutes. The thing about the Luis Diaz thing, and he obviously plays centre forward nominally here in this one, and he grabs a hat trick. But for me, the subtleties of his game have improved so much. Like I loved Luis Diaz when he was a winger at Porto, but he still felt so raw. That was part of what made him so fun, right? And I think that rawness was something that Klopp wanted to harness rather than necessarily sharpen. Whereas I think Slot has clearly been in and be like, okay, let's just round off some of those rough edges, shall we? And make you into a more rounded player. There's so much more of a determination to his decision-making, his finishing, his clinicality in front goal, clearly on show here. And yet that hasn't taken away from his cheekiness, the sort of impishness of him in how he goes about his business, a la that no-look finish that he does for the third. It's a really dreamy combination. And he looks the best version of himself at the moment. And I don't think that's a surprise that Slot was partly brought in because of his ability to improve the players that were already there. And you can see that in a number of players. But I think in Luis Diaz's game, and especially now having him as a kind of versatile forward and hearing Slot speak about this as well, saying, oh, well, we thought that actually putting a proper number 9 up against Jonathan Tah and giving him a physical battle was something that he would relish. I think Slot called him the best defender in Germany, which I think is a stretch this season, but might have been true last year. And obviously that works in the second half because Diaz pulls off. He comes into the midfield. He drops deep and Tah is sort of left marking no one. It's not the most complicated tactic in the world, but it's quite a bold one in a big Champions League game with a lot of emotion around it, especially with Xabi Alonso coming back. So to do that and then to pull it off on top of everything else, I think shows just how much faith that the players have already in Slot, and rightly so, because so many of them, and especially so many of the key pieces in his new side, feel like they've improved from last year.
Yeah, definitely. And I think obviously with the start of the season that they had, Slot was trying to be wary and didn't want to get too carried away given the sort of fixtures that they'd faced. And it'd been quite a friendly fixture list, but he was like, give it time before you get too carried away. Let's see what we're actually made of. And now you start to look at the recent results. I mean, beating Leverkusen at 4-0 by 4-0 is an unbelievable result. But then, obviously, the manner of their recent win over Brighton in the league, that crazy game that they had against Arsenal, getting a draw out of that one was good enough. They beat Leipzig away 1-0. They beat Chelsea at home 2-1. I think that those results over the past month are really, really strong indicators that Liverpool are serious, man. They're really serious. And can they continue to handle a title challenge in the Premier League and remain at the top of the Champions League? Who knows? We genuinely have no idea whether this team's ready for it.
Especially given this season. But I think they're the best bet to do that, given what the evidence is that we have, right? And
they're just so calm, They're just so calm about what they're achieving. They're just yeah, cool. Let's see if it carries on. Van Dijk literally said, yeah, it's work in progress. You just battered. You just done Leverkusen. I say battered isn't a bit harsh, but 4-0. You've beaten Leverkusen, and there's no oh yeah, this is great. The coach has got us doing this and that. It's just yeah, it's cool, but we're still in early November, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, look, the tests keep coming, right? They've got Aston Villa at Anfield at the weekend. They have Real Madrid in their next Champions League game, and then there's a game straight after that against Manchester City. So it's not like they have a soft touch over the next couple of games either, right? So we will keep an eye on Liverpool, but I mean, so far so good, right? The only thing I would say about this, and it goes back to your point about the City result, right, is that it's going to sound a bit weird, but I actually thought Leverkusen got a lot right in this game. They talked in the build-up. A lot of Leverkusen players, Granit Xhaka came out and spoke about this, about why the 0-0 against Stuttgart was the best performance they'd had all season because they suffocated their opposition. And I thought they took that determination and resilience into an absolutely brilliant first half. They were clever in how they tried to close off the middle. I really liked their press, felt very coordinated, felt very sharp. And I thought they moved the ball really well for long spells of this game with Xhaka in the middle, just kind of as a controller. Liverpool were just too good for them after the break. They took their chances brilliantly, and Anfield roared into its purest form, which you often find on Champions League nights. It was something that Xabi Alonso alluded to. It really is a special place when that music plays, when the lights come on, and sometimes it just wraps teams in the whirlwind. That felt kind of what happened in this game. So it's weird to come out of this and say, I thought Leverkusen did a lot that you can kind of look back at and be like, yeah, that was actually pretty good when they've lost 4-0. But just like you with the City game, I feel there are plenty of positives for them to take in the way that they went about them, their business and acquitted themselves here.
Yeah, absolutely. That I think you're right. I mean, I've only seen the short highlights of this game, so I can't give much deeper analysis than what you're offering. But that seems reflective too from what I've read of the game, and it's hard to we've keep saying it every week about how hard it is to assess this version of the Champions League, and we're all learning every single week from what it actually is and what it means. Yeah. But it's interesting that this is the way it's wrapping out at
the moment. So that's good. That's good. And it was another big shock last night. It happened at the Bernabeu. So you're going to talk us through that one,
mate? Yeah, Madrid beaten 3-1 at home by AC Milan, and Real Madrid currently 18th in the Champions League. 18th. 4 matches played, and they've only got 6 points. This is the team that genuinely would be expecting to see in top spot. This is their competition, and it's really not going their way at the moment. To the extent that if they lose their next game in the Champions League, you'll actually be thinking, hang on, are they even going to get through? What is going on here?
And that's at Anfield.
Exactly. That is you're like, oh, well, they'll definitely win the next one. It's like, well, no, they won't, because the next game is at Anfield in the Champions League. The one after that is Atalanta away. No.
It's not pretty.
This is not pretty. No, it's not. It's not good at all. So, look, Ancelotti's not really hiding behind anything here. He's like, we're missing something basically. I read one report that said, they're missing Courtois and Carvajal. That's what they're missing at the moment.
At the back,
yeah, it's a fair point because their defense is way too easy to breach at the moment. Obviously, Barcelona went to the Bernabeu and crushed them 4-0. Now you've seen AC Milan go there in the next match and
the
score
Barcelona
3
result,
against
though,
them.
felt plausible. This result did not feel plausible considering how Milan have been playing, right? And obviously things can get topsy-turvy, and they had a big result at the away, in inverted commas, at Inter, but nobody thought Milan were going to the Bernabeu, despite how bad Real Madrid have been in recent weeks, and were winning 3-1. Like, nobody, and not especially with this performance, where they were excellent.
Yeah, they were. And I think it was admirable in the way that they kept their mindset throughout the game. Obviously, they go 1-0 up, and then Vinny pulls it back with a cheeky penalty, which I was relieved about because we'd about an hour earlier recorded the main episode of Ranks where we'd stuck him at the top of our superstars list. So I was pleased to see him pull off something a bit special from the penalty spot. But then Morata scores one of my favourite type of goals. I mean, Sam even texted us in our WhatsApp group being like, "Oh, Dean, I'm almost on board with you on this Morata goal." Like, it's just pure number 9 stuff, It's like it's lovely. The goal, the shot from Leao is lovely, and then the follow up from Morata is perfect. But obviously, like, we saw Dortmund hold a lead at the Bernabeu and retreat and kind of give up on what had brought them joy. And the brave thing about AC Milan is that they didn't necessarily do that. And actually, you never got the feeling that one of those great comebacks was on the cards here. It never sounded...
You never do until they do it, I suppose.
No, but I don't... Even when they got that disallowed goal, Rudiger's goal that went in here, it was like, it just felt flat. It just didn't feel like, that goal, if it had counted, there would have been like 10 minutes left, so you'd have been expecting it. I was just like, I don't think this really changes anything because the fans tonight do not seem like they believe. And you could see by the end of the game how many empty seats there were in a Bernabeu. And that is pretty rare, that they don't believe in the team coming back. And I know that they had a 2-goal deficit and people were probably just keen to get home and whatever else, but it's still pretty rare. And if it wasn't Ancelotti in charge, the manager would have felt the wrath. I mean, there were still quite a few whistles around the stadium and stuff, but, as I say, if it wasn't Ancelotti, I think it would have been worse than a few whistles, because this team is an absolute state at the moment. The balance is completely gone. And the Kylian Mbappe conundrum remains. I mean, I think that probably the most negative thing about Mbappe coming in is not just that he doesn't suit the position he's having to play, but the negative impact it's having on both Jude Bellingham and Rodrigo is just kind of a shame. Rodrigo should this season be coming into his own in this team when you consider like the impact that he had been having, and he deserved to be a bigger part of this team. I think they really miss him. I think they really miss him in terms of balance in this attack. And we're just not seeing enough of him because Mbappe has to play as much as he can. And for whatever reason, I heard Thierry Henry talking about this on CBS after the game. He was talking about like the runs from Mbappe. He's like, where are the runs in behind? He has to be making them.
Well, weirdly, I thought he did do this yesterday, right? But the problem is that he was on the right-hand side yesterday and the angles aren't right for him. So he did actually get in behind a few times, but I have no faith that Mbappe is going to score from that position. And that's quite weird because we've seen him make that run from the opposite side multiple times. And look, he doesn't score every time he does it, but you have, pretty good faith that 1 in 2 he's going to bury. And when he does it from the right, I have almost no faith that he's going to score. Yeah. Like, okay, there's 1 or 2 good saves here from Mike Mignon, but there's others where you're like, that's straight at the keeper. It doesn't feel right with the angles. And I honestly do think that it's important for Real Madrid that they've shifted Mbappe to the right because they know they've got Vinicius. And the fact is that Vinicius has reasserted the dominance there of being like, by the way, I'm the guy, you're going to have to move him because I'm not playing over there. And this is my position. And look, that's going to be a headache. It's going to be a problem. I've been saying it since the start of the season. And we both said we think Ancelotti's going to work it out. But it shows no signs of easing.
No, and because they don't have a philosophy or structure that Ancelotti is known for or that they typically stick to, you're back to that feeling of, okay, well, if you're going to run on vibes, if you're going to run on unity and belief, then
it has to be there.
It has to be there. And we've only seen it there in that Dortmund game where, as I say, Dortmund were retreating and they kind of became their own worst enemy in that game. It was a fantastic, spectacular second half, and it was amazing to watch it unfold. But Dortmund certainly didn't help themselves in those moments. And with a more experienced manager, that probably wouldn't have happened. So it's very, very interesting now. Shouts out to Pulisic as well, by the way, who again has a great game, and Leao turned up as well. Like that makes a massive difference. So
I thought that, you know what? I thought that Milan got it right, and Fonseca got it right in terms of how he set this team up. He spoke about it before the game. He said, if we're going to do this, the keys are going to be Theo and Leao. And considering he's been pretty hot on all things Pulisic, and reasonably so, right, considering the start he's had the season all year, I thought it was interesting. And maybe it was a little bit quelling the fires and saying that, a lot of the people saying that they've had a falling out, Leao and Fonseca, and maybe quietening that down a little bit. But they then executed that game plan to perfection. They sat back. I thought the Yunus Musa was incredible, doubling back and helping out on Vinicius. From a left back, I thought that Theo did his defensive duties beautifully, and it left Leao to basically run and do what he needs to do. And if you have a player of Leao's caliber and brilliance, you do have to pander to him a little bit. And I don't think Fonseca probably was doing that enough. But, to a man, Milan were almost absolutely brilliant. And I thought the use of Fofana did a brilliant job at the base of midfield. But Yunus Musa in particular, and the way that allowed the defence to shift about, he basically played right wing back at times in order to sort of tuck in there, give some extra protection on the left, and then release Leao to get in behind, especially with Lucas Vazquez, who's really struggling right at this point. He looks exhausted, for one. He has never had to play this many games in a row at right back because Carvajal's been pretty much an ever-present, but they don't have any other cover, and he's getting torched week on week at this point.
Yeah, that's true. He really is. These are the harsh realities of the kind of state they've left himself in with their squad build, obviously on the Tchouameni's had a bit of a mare here as well for Real Madrid. He's not covered himself in glory at all, giving the ball away and then struggling to adapt to the situation he finds himself in. So, look, I don't think I'm exaggerating here when I say that in games 7 and 8, Madrid are fighting to stay in the Champions League. Fortunately, they've got Salzburg and Brest in those two matches, but who knows at this stage if that's even a good thing. Exactly. Yeah, I don't. I'm talking about them fortunately in terms of the name of those teams, but Brest are looking like one of the best teams in the Champions League. So let's see.
Yeah, let's see indeed. Right, let's round up the rest of Tuesday's action. And I wanted to start with Celtic 3, RB Leipzig 1. Dean, absolutely Celtic's best performance in Europe so far. Everything clicked under the lights in Parkhead, played with a real swagger and confidence that kind of belied their status within this competition as a nuisance rather than something to be considered. It puts them in a really, really strong position to qualify at this point. They have a pretty soft ending to their schedule as well, and they're currently comfortably in those positions. They're on the same points as Arsenal. Look, Leipzig took the lead kind of against the run of play. Celtic had started really, really well, but even that was kind of a gift. And whilst Leipzig maybe needs to be more clinical, and they did have this brief period of dominance just after the goal, they looked well beaten long before the end of this, devoid of life and energy. And all of that, I think, was due to Celtic's intensity, the press, which was exceptional, the tempo as well, with which they knocked the ball around. They looked at home in the Champions League against a genuine opposition. And look, Leipzig, we'll talk about in a sec, are struggling, but a serious side in the Champions League who are regularly in this competition. It has been a long, long time since we've been able to say that about Celtic, right? I mean, the flip side of that is that it was another deeply disappointing showing from Leipzig in the Champions League. That's the yin to the yang of it. When one team plays really well, another one has usually not done the same. But I don't know what it is. They just lacked the spark and intensity and any sort of dynamism in the way that they were playing. I really can't put my finger on it. It's just clearly not working for them in the Champions League in the same way that it is in the Bundesliga. And it doesn't hugely make any sense. It's not like they're making loads and loads of personnel changes. It maybe just as a structure isn't having the same effect in Europe that it has been able to in the Bundesliga. I know they lost to Dortmund at the weekend, but considering the start that they've had, the two kind of Jekyll and Hyde sides of Leipzig just don't really seem to add up. And again, I can't really work it out, and I can't tell you why, but they just don't look like they have like any desire to do well in this competition. Yeah. And I mean, part of me at the kind of cynical level is being like, Leipzig just sort of playing this out so they can have a serious go at the Bundesliga title whilst Bayern are still, in some ways, rebuilding. They've obviously been pretty good domestically, but they're definitely not the finished article yet. While Leverkusen have dropped off a little bit, while Dortmund don't look the finished version of themselves, maybe Leipzig are looking at that and thinking this could be our opportunity before someone builds a dynasty again. And by someone, I mean Bayern. But maybe they're looking at that and thinking, well, we'll just be in the Champions League. But I mean, that can't be the case. But equally, I can't really work out why else they just don't seem to be able to perform at all in this competition. Yeah. Who knows? Just one last bit on this. Nicholas Kuhn signed from Celtic from Rapid Vienna. And I was a bit concerned about it because, I had no idea what they were doing. His underlying numbers were pretty poor. He hadn't exactly set the world on fire at Vienna. And he started really slow in his Celtic career. And I was like, oh, God, they've just made an absolute balls up in the transfer market. But no, they were absolutely right. Coming up against the club where he came through the academy, it felt like he had a point to prove, and he did it in such delightful fashion. The curler into the corner is my goal of the week. I love something that goes past the keeper, looks like it's going wide, clips the post and goes in. It's an absolutely gorgeous strike. And he gets a second, but he was a nuisance all night long on that right-hand side. I thought he was brilliant, and hold my hands up, I was really unconvinced by Nicholas Kuhn. And this season, he's been sensational. This was the jewel in the crown of what have been some very, very good performances. So shouts out to him.
Yeah, I saw him being talked about as a £50 million footballer now. So amazing what can happen.
Yeah, let's not do that one yet. Let's not go there just yet, shall we? Blonde dyes a minder, by the way, still the guy. Right, Borussia Dortmund beat Sturm Graz 1-0. Not particularly pretty from them, but another important win. They continue this slight mini resurgence. This time it was Daniel Marlin's late show that ended up winning it, but ultimately, genuinely what I took from this was that they just needed to get the job done, and they did. They dominated the game, across the board, but they just couldn't find the goal. You take the rough with the smooth a little bit with this side, who do feel very young, who do feel in real transition. They're still learning, but they did what they needed to do, and a more controlled performance at the very least from Borussia Dortmund. So 3 important points. They will take them away. They'll be happy with the way that ended. PSV won 4-0 against Girona. And this team was the Malik Tillman show. 2 assists and a goal for the American. He absolutely torched this Girona defence. I said on the last Champions League takeaway, I think, that Girona can't defend for love nor money this season. But even given that Girona went down to 10 early, Tillman was irresistible here. Absolute wizardry in the middle for this PSV unit. They really do have the capacity to blow teams away when they get into their groove. I thought it was interesting variation from the 3 goals he was involved in. The first assist is a long throw. It's rare you see, a winger with his kind of, or number 10, with his kind of technical capability, getting a long throw assist, but really smart, switched on to get that one. His goal was this mad, mazy dribble down the left-hand side, which is beautiful. And then he gets a third contribution, which is a little bit of a Tom Carroll assist. He sets up Bakayoko, but Bakayoko still had a lot to do. But he ran the show, and the US really do have a star in their hands. There will be serious interest growing in Malik Tillman. He's a serious footballer.
Wow, I'll have to keep an eye on him, mate, for my transfer work then in that sense.
100%. Lille drew 1-1 with Juve. Jonathan David is now joint 3rd top scorer in the competition. His finish here to open the scoring was really, really nice as well. He's now bagged against Real Madrid, Atleti and Juventus. So his stock continues to rise. A lovely ball from Edin Grover as well to set him up. From a Juventus perspective, Conceição, the spark again. I said recently on a post box that He reminds me of a leaner, trickier Eden Hazard off the opposite wing, with the way that he sort of manipulates the ball around defenders to make things happen. He's not quite as physically kind of barrels through challenges, but the way that he makes defenders just sort of fall over does remind me of what Hazard used to do on the edge of the box. He wins the penalty that Vlahovic smashes home to level it up, share the spoils, but I didn't think that either side would be too disappointment with this result in the grander scheme of things. But a couple of nice performances across the board. Monaco won 1-0 against Bologna. 3 wins out of 4 for Monaco. They left it late as well. Skipper Thilo Kehrer scoring the winner from a sort of flicked on corner by Braylen Bolo. They did probably edge it. Bologna are getting better after a completely reasonable shaky start, both domestically and in Europe, especially given, what they lost this summer, Motta, Xerxes. They still don't have Lewis Ferguson back. It does feel like they are rebuilding almost from the top, and Calafiori, of course. But Monaco are a really good side, and they're doing very sensible things. There's been a lot of madness in the Champions League. Monaco feel quite sensible. They dominated the opening exchanges in this one. They kind of took their foot off the gas, so they didn't burn themselves out, but they didn't leave themselves exposed when Bologna got a foothold, and then they just saw the job out late. Mark of a very, very competent unit. So keeping an eye on Monaco, who are very much in that top 8 at the moment. Slovan Bratislava lost 4-1 at home to Dinamo Zagreb. Sadly, Bratislava really are the whipping boys of this competition, and that really continued here. Zagreb didn't have to do all that much in order to win this one quite comfortably. Slovan did take the lead early on, but Petar Sucic scored again. He continues to impress in the Zagreb midfield. Marco Piazza seems reborn when Manny, including me, thought he was into like his retirement era. And Zagreb have a serious shout at the playoffs. I said before that no one is going to want to go and face this side in winter at the Maximir, but they showed some real ability away from home as here as well. So, yeah, I think the Zagreb are going to be a nasty little opponent for someone in a playoff round, and my money right now would be on them getting there.
Very good, mate. Very good. I would not have had them on my radar coming into this at all, but yeah, they're better than Real Madrid, it turns out.
Yeah, it seems so at the moment. Anyway, right, we will leave Tuesday's action there. When we come back, we're going to talk about all things Wednesday. Don't go anywhere.
Is shopping for health coverage confusing? Georgia's got you covered. Georgia Access is our state's program for all residents to find quality, affordable health insurance. At georgiaaccess.gov, you can explore a variety of plan options. You may even qualify for no-cost coverage. Open enrollment is happening now. Visit georgiaaccess.gov today. Georgia Access. Health insurance the Georgia way.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/podcast.
Welcome back to Ranks FC, where it's time for our Wednesday bit of Champions League takeaway. Dean, you're going to take us away with Arsenal, who lost 1-0 at the Giuseppe Meazza San Siro to Inter. Another loss for Mikel Arteta.
Yeah, now lost 3 of their last 6 matches in all competitions. So all that hype is starting to die out now, and we're wondering if their season is going to whittle away. Martin Odegaard did come onto the pitch late on into the game, so there is some good news for Arsenal to take here, that Odegaard is back in the picture again. Good to see their captain back. But Declan Rice was missing for this one, so Partey was back in midfield, and Ben White went into the back 4. And we're coming into this game, and neither of these teams looked like conceding a goal in the Champions League the way things were going. Inter started off fast out of the blocks. They had 2 good chances in the first 3 minutes, one of which rattled the crossbar. And it wasn't really what you would have been expecting. I thought, given what had been said coming into the match, that Inter would just look to control possession and take things kind of calmly, but they didn't at all. They just burst out the blocks, hit the bar and stuck one just wide. And obviously they then take the lead through a Çalhanoğlu penalty. Arsenal fans will say it's controversial. But he's scored 19 out of 19 penalties now for Inter Milan, Çalhanoğlu.
100%. And with Rodri injured, he is currently the best centre defensive midfielder in the world. So there's that as well.
Absolutely is. But obviously, you can't hide from the fact that it's been a bad week for Mikel Arteta. Edu was resigned as sporting director. Those two have a close partnership, and now their unbeaten run in the Champions League is over, and they have to reflect on a defeat. They deserve something from the game, if I'm totally honest. Like particularly second half, like they had all the ball. They had what should have been the best of the chances. They just couldn't really carve into open. I mean, I have to give credit to Inter Milan's defending. I mean, they were just putting their bodies on the line again.
Well,
they
haven't conceded a goal in the Champions League, so there's that.
No, and they still, I'm going to say, like Arsenal hadn't, and now Inter remain a side that have not conceded a goal yet in this competition. Inter Milan are 5th in the Champions League as it stands right now after 4 match weeks, and scored 6, conceded none of those 4 games, of which they've won 3 and drawn 1. So it's a solid start for Inter Milan. But Arsenal were just looking for that moment and just couldn't quite find it. There was a couple of opportunities. Havertz would have felt that possibly he came closest, but they were just really like crying out for Arteta to try something different. They needed some guile. They needed someone to kind of like just find their way between the lines and make something happen. It took until the 81st minute to kind of make a sub which might do that. And interestingly, despite having Odegaard on the bench, despite having Raheem Sterling on the bench, it was Ethan Nwaneri that was brought into the frame. And he did actually magic up one moment. He stuck the shot over the bar, but it's a pretty central position. He uses his body to do one of those kind of body swerve turns that he does, switches it out of his feet and then just sticks it over the bar. But it was a good moment, and it just made you wonder what would have happened if Nwaneri had been in the game for a bit longer, because it felt like it was that type of player that was missing for Arsenal here. So as I say, like they'll be a little bit disappointed because they really did dominate the second half. A draw would probably have been the fair result, to be honest, especially given that Arsenal will feel a bit hard done by it on the penalty. But at the end of the day, we know what Inter Milan do. They are a resolute defence. They want to be hard to beat. They'll stick that back 5 across as needed, and they'll break away with the wing backs as needed. And Arsenal just couldn't really find a way to break it down.
It's a weird one because if you look at the stat line from this game, you kind of look at the amount of crosses that Arsenal swung in, you look at the amount of shots they had compared to Inter, you'd probably look at it and think, oh, Arsenal must have come pretty close. And I'm kind of with you. I think they deserved a draw. But the stats kind of suggest that they dominate. And I think that probably does Inter a little bit of a disservice, because at no point was I like, oh, Arsenal are really, they had a couple of good chances, but they sort of came from moments or individual kind of players digging something out. The save that Jan Sommer makes from Havertz is absolutely sensational, and credit must be given to it.
Definitely.
There was also the header off the line. But
Headed off the line from Dumfries.
Inter hit the bar after 2 minutes of this game with their first attack, and you were kind of looking at it. Arsenal had all the ball up to that point. They'd knocked it around quite nicely. They'd forayed up, they'd come back, they'd forayed up again, and then Inter nicked the ball and they'd steam into the Arsenal box, and Dumfries hits the bar. And you're like, wow, that felt easy. And I don't know if that's just Rice's omission, which is, a considerable one for Arsenal. He's a big part of how that midfield works. But I was kind of thinking at that point, it's going to be a long night for Arsenal. It wasn't quite as bad as that. And they did, actually gain control and a foothold in the game. But it didn't feel loads like they were going to find that equaliser. It wasn't like there was sustained periods of pressure where Inter felt really super under the cosh, I didn't think. There were just moments, flashes for Arsenal. And that, I think, has to be a worry, because when you're 1-0 down away from home, look, this isn't the result that's going to knock Arsenal out of the Champions League. Arsenal are going to be fine, right? They're going to qualify, via the playoffs or via the top 8. I don't know, but they're going to qualify for the latter stages of the Champions League. And losing away at the Italian champions, but also against an Inter side who are very, very well put together and who are slowly grinding into gear right at this point of the season into do what they do, and they do it incredibly well. They feel, I think, incredibly upset about the way that last season's Champions League campaign ended with that penalty shootout loss to Atletico Madrid. they think they probably could have, had a real go at it last season. And that's one of those ones that will kind of stick in their jaw. But I do think that it's interesting that with all of that pressure and possession, it didn't feel like Arsenal were particularly creative. And that's, I think, more worrying than Arsenal not finishing their chances. That's the thing that worries me from an Arsenal perspective.
They had 20 shots, 4 of them were on target. Inter Milan only had 1 shot on target. That was the penalty. Arsenal had 63% of possession. Arsenal had 13 corners. Inter Milan didn't have a single corner. I mean, there's plenty of positives to take away from Arsenal here. And I think that generally they'll feel hard done by is probably the wrong word.
Yeah, no,
because I think they'll even admit that they just lacked that spark. But Arteta does this. Arteta sometimes just takes a little longer than you'd like as a fan to bring someone else into the fold to kind of take that risk. And I just feel if you'd have bought one area on 10 minutes earlier, maybe you'd have got that moment.
Yeah, okay, yeah, 100%. I think maybe that's the thing. And look, with a fit Ødegaard, maybe he's the one that opens that up. And I appreciate the argument about injuries, but equally you've got to find solutions as well at this point, because it feels like Arsenal are in a bit of a spiral and they need to get out of it real quick. And they have Chelsea at the Bridge at the weekend. So one of those. There is an episode coming out on Arsenal very shortly on Ranks FC. Dougie and Sam talking about, is Mikel Arteta too defensive? Is that the issue with Arsenal? Or is it something different to that? So that'll be out on Friday morning. Make sure you're tuned in. I wanted to go quickly to PSG Atletico Madrid, Dean. Atleti win 2-1 in Paris. Another pretty damning result for PSG, and another damning result for my assertion and the fact that I've been quite bullish that I do think PSG are going to get going. It's really weird because PSG looks so much better off the bat here. They dominate the opening exchanges. Dembele looks super sharp. Even the goal, which comes from a really dumb mistake from Clement Longley, was well-deserved. And also PSG were really sharp to pounce on it. Dembele sort of digging into the middle and laying it up for Warren Zaire-Emery, who tucks it away beautifully, actually. And it was so much better in the opening exchanges. And Atleti score what is quite a fortunate goal. It falls out wide to Giuliano Simeone, who's really making himself a little bit of a name, a little run in the side for Simeone Jr. He was an absolute pest down that right-hand side for PSG. And he cracks this sort of half volley at Donnarumma, who palms it away. There's not much that Donnarumma can do about this strike. He palms it away and palms it away relatively well. PSG don't clear it. Molina picks it up. It sort of bounces off defender, bounces off Molina, and then he just fires it home when it drops to him in the box. It's one of those goals that's a bit like, I don't really know. Maybe you should clear it quicker, but it's just one of those things where the ricochets have done you in. But it comes right after the PSG goal. And it kind of knocks the stuffing out of them a little bit. Right. And from that moment, they looked nowhere near as sharp, nowhere near as good across the rest of the game. Now, they dominated for the rest of the first half. They dominated in particular the second half. They had all of the play, all of the chances. They are throwing everything forward to get this goal. And the crowd are roaring them on. They leave themselves horribly exposed. The ball drops out to Griezmann from a long clearance, who picks it up, pings one across to Correa, who came on as a sub ahead of Alexander Sorloth, which I thought was interesting. Obviously Sorloth cost a lot of money in the summer, but I love that Correa is just pure chaos. Like, he's just one of those players who makes things happen. And he has been the person who's come up late for Atleti time and time and time again this season, right? We saw it obviously in the Madrid derby, but Correa's been the guy that Simeone has turned to, not just this season, but particularly this season, to kind of get them out of a bind. And he does really well. It's a long pass across from Griezmann. He spins his defender and shoots, and Donnarumma should save it, but it goes under him. We've heard that before. And PSG end up losing this game to an Atleti side who barely reached the opposition box in between either of their goals, which happened 70 odd minutes apart, right? So, like, the fact PSG haven't won this game is absolutely baffling. But it comes back to this kind of sense of who's going to be the guy, who's going to step up. And look, Luis Enrique's record in the Champions League is pretty dire with PSG. I think it's 6 wins from 16 games, which is not what they're going to be expecting, and not the reason that Qatar bought PSG in the first place. They're going to be expecting returns on that. Now, this is transitional as a season. They're moving away from Mbappe. They're moving towards a more kind of homegrown core, and I get all of those things. And it's part of the reason I really liked PSG this year. And look, they've been really dominant in France. But there is just something about them that feels like they're missing that kind of almost confidence to believe in themselves to actually get the job done. And their results in the Champions League have been a little bit all over the place. Even the win against Girona in week 1. Look, I've come out here the last 2 weeks after that and said that Girona can't defend, right? And yet Girona gave PSG a really good game that day. And it was only a mistake from Gazzaniga that ended up with the ball in the back of the net. Now, PSG have been all right, but it was a pretty, interesting contest. Girona defended really well. And now I'm like, how do they defend really well against PSG and not defend really well against anybody else? That doesn't add up. I do wonder if it's just a little bit of kind of naivety in the final third ball. Maybe it's the hangover of being so reliant on Kylian Mbappe over the last few years and knowing that he was going to be the guy that broke things off. Maybe it's this new transition. But they just look a little bit shorn of confidence as soon as something doesn't go their way. Like the way they start this game so beautifully and so brilliantly and so intensely compared to what they look like in the second half is really weird. And yes, Atleti defend well, which is weird because they give away the first goal completely. And Atleti don't feel like they have a settled back line at the moment. But that second half performance, it just felt a little bit like knocking the ball around, waiting for the opening to come rather than forcing it. And that's a little bit uncomfortable, I think, from a PSG perspective.
Yeah, look, they're 25th at the moment. They've got 4 points from 4 games. As it stands right now, they're not going to get through. And their next game is against Bayern in the Champions League as well. So it's not like they've got a bounce back match there. Like they haven't at all. Bayern's their next Champions League game. Then they've got Salzburg. They've got Manchester City. And then they've got Stuttgart as their last Champions League game. Like that is not straightforward.
It's a rough ride. It's a rough ride. Like
so
there's
might not make
very
it.
good chance that PSG pick up 3 more points.
Mate, that's probably not enough. I might squeeze you, but probably not enough.
Maybe
probably
not. I don't know.
Probably not, because you consider right now, they're 1 point off of already being in that area, so they've already got to make up 1 point. So the teams above them have all got 4 games left. They're gonna pick up more than 2 points.
And the teams below them could pick up points.
The teams below them probably will, yeah, at least a couple of them. So yeah, not looking good at all for PSG.
No, they're uncomfortable, I think is probably how I would put it. Right, before we go into a roundup, we should probably talk about Aston Villa, whose perfect record in the Champions League was smashed by Club Brugge, of all people. I don't think anybody was expecting that at the start of play this evening. What did you make of it?
Well, Villa are down the drain at the moment, aren't they? Lost to Crystal Palace in the EFL Cup, lost to Tottenham in the league, and now they've lost to Club Brugge in the Champions League. 3 L's in a row for Aston Villa. Absolute nightmare, really, for Unai Emery to be looking at this. What does it all mean? Brugge did dominate the game. From a Villa perspective at the moment, everything just seems a bit slower, less urgent. I was looking back to when they last lost 3 in a row. It was back in May. But if you go any further than that, you're going back to February 2023. At the weekend, Aston Villa have got Liverpool. So you're looking...
Not ideal, really.
Yeah, probably... I'm going to say it. Probably 4 defeats in a row here for Unai Emery. And suddenly you're left thinking, hang on, are they actually as good as we thought they were? Have we jumped the gun on this? What are we going to get out of them for the rest of the season? Some slight strange decisions again for Emery here. His team lineups have been all over the place at the moment in terms of who starts when. No, Nana, Dina, Pau Torres from the start here. Rodgers played in a wider role with McGinn through the middle. Just a bit strange. And I'm not entirely sure how they pick themselves up from this. What I do know is they shouldn't pick up the ball, Jack. You shouldn't pick up the ball ever in a football match. And Tyrone Mings has done it. It's not the game. No matter, I don't know why it's happened. If you haven't seen this yet, quickly stop the pod and go and look at how Aston Villa have conceded this game and how they conceded their goal, because Tyrone Mings used his hands to pick the ball up, give it back to his goalie from a goal kick. Yes, it is very similar to the moment that Arsenal had in the Champions League and got away with. Nevertheless, he's handballed it during a football match on purpose. Why would you ever do that? There's no need for it.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Also, I think you kind of summed it up there. there's a thing here, and Villa fans can and will cry foul on this. I think it's fair, and I think the penalty should have been given against Arsenal as well, right? And I said that at the time. Like, once the ball's in play, you don't put your hand on it. That's the rules. And I don't really know what you're thinking at that moment to do that. But the point might not be that they concede through a stupid goal. The point is that they are dominated by a Club Brugge side who, right, admittedly are playing their 100th game in Champions League, in the modern Champions League, where Villa are playing, their 4th, So there is that sense of they've been there and done it a little bit more. But it's still quite a young Brugge team, a lot of academy homegrown products who are in there and who have recruited well, but are still seen relatively, I think, as cannon fodder. Now, a couple of weeks ago, they played Dortmund, and we sat here and I said, I think they're going to give a fair few teams a bit of a run for their money. I think people are going to underestimate them. But I didn't see them dominating Aston Villa in the way that they did in this game. And I completely agree with you on the Emery sort of weird decisions thing, because one of those kind of odd things that you kind of keep an eye on, and my thing is his 4-4-2 when he goes to 2 strikers with Watkins and Duran, and it doesn't work. Now, Unai Emery has often played a 4-4-2, right? He did it at Villarreal to great effect, but never really with 2 out-and-out strikers. There was always a player in there that felt that they didn't really belong in the front 2, and they were able to do other things. Giovanni Lo Celso did it a lot. Arnaut Danjuma, even to an extent, right? Who kind of is a winger 10 who plays in that role. And when they play 4-4-2 and one of them is Morgan Rogers, I think it works really nicely. But I don't think Villa have answers when it's Duran and Watkins up front together. And I don't think at this point, maybe this changes, maybe they work it out. I don't think they play together very well. And that's a problem when you're chasing games and that's your go-to solution. It didn't work at the weekend against Tottenham. It hasn't worked really this season, and it didn't work again here. It wasn't like Villa were at the end of this pounding on the door for an equaliser. Brugge had the ball the last 4 minutes. They were just knocking it about. And I think there's something very weird going on. Maybe it's the intensity that's lacking, and maybe that's because the rotation elements of this aren't quite as strong as perhaps they'd want to be, and that Unai Emery's team are a little bit more tired than others because they haven't been able to rotate to the same degree that other teams have been. And they're not used to playing at this level on a Wednesday and then a Saturday, week in, week out. But it really does feel like at the moment they're stuck in a bit of a rut. Some of it is tactical. Some of it is probably in terms of just fatigue. But they need to find a solution. I trust Emery to do that, but they still need to find it.
Yeah. We'll have to wait to see exactly what Aston Villa turn out to be when they go through the wash over the next few weeks and come out the other side of this. And Emery's got his hands on them and fixed a few things tactically, and maybe he has been overthinking it a little bit. It's hard when you have such a good start to a season not to get carried away. There's not enough urgency about them at the moment, and maybe it's a little bit of back to basics.
Yeah, 100%. Villa are going to be fine. Again, another one, they'll be absolutely fine. But it's just a bit of a kick in the teeth, this one, because they would have probably secured a top 8 spot if they'd won this one and maybe one more, which you'd imagine that they probably will do in the last 4. So, hey, they'll be all right. Shall we round up the other bits? Bayern Munich won 1-0 against Benfica. Bayern really needed this in the Champions League, Dean, and they delivered, I think, with a really comprehensive performance that the scoreline probably doesn't really do justice to. They dominated from the absolute off here. It was quite a frustrating first half in that they couldn't find the back of the net, but Benfica just didn't really come to play. And even the moments they did try and find a bit of a groove, they were suffocated by Bayern. Now, this is an interesting one because it felt like quite a big moment for both teams. Benfica obviously lost their last game, and Bayern have had a bit of a rough run of it. But it really confused me that Benfica didn't try to employ any of the same tactics that served Barcelona so well against Bayern the other week. It's fine to sit a bit deeper. You're at the Allianz. It's not an easy place to go, and you have to soak up a fair bit of pressure. But they just really didn't feel like they had an outball. They really didn't feel like they were able to try and hit them in transition, to get someone stretching this back line. And that seems really weird considering where Benfica have been under Bruno Lage since he replaced Roger Schmidt. It's a funny balance to strike, and I appreciate that. And you don't want to overexpose yourself, especially because a point here would have probably been a very good result for Benfica, and they came relatively close to actually securing that. but they left the keeper with far too much to do, I think. And he made some outstanding saves, and he needs some real credit. Like Anatoly Trubin's done very well this season, I think, for Benfica, and he deserves real credit for his showing here. But like, to just basically be like, go on then, come at us again, felt like a really odd strategy. And eventually the dam broke, and it broke in a really nice way. It was a great cross from Leroy Sané. Kane heads it back across, and Musiala sticks it into the roof of the net. Great goal. But you kind of expect at that point Benfica to come out a bit more and maybe try and, earn themselves a point or kind of hurt Bayern a little bit more. It just didn't really happen. And I don't quite know exactly what to make of it. Bayern were good, really good. But equally, I kind of expected them to get a little bit more of a test. Not, test from a defensive standpoint. Offensively, they basically did a training exercise. And they just basically tried to break down a very stubborn Benfica block. And that's one thing. But it just felt like a bit of an odd game plan from my perspective from Benfica, especially at 1-0 down.
Yeah, I mean, they had one shot off target all game. That's it. That's all they had to show from an attacking standpoint. And they had 26% of the ball, Benfica. Bayern had 24 shots at goal. 10 of them were on target, and they had 74% possession, 10 corners. It's unbelievable. It was only 1-0.
Yeah, I mean, look, sometimes stats can be misleading, right? After, we talked about the ones in the Arsenal-Inter game, but these are not. These are not misleading. This is exactly what happened in the game. It was just wave of. Weirdly, Benfica wore red, but the game was at Bayern, which was really uncomfortable. But, aside from that, I was going to say wave on wave of red pressure, but actually it was wave of white pressure on a red team, which is a bit of an odd one. But anyway, Bayern got a much-needed win, and they very much deserved it. But I would have liked to see them tested a little bit more because they've dominated teams that are weaker than them this season in the Bundesliga, but they haven't had all that many challenges. And when they have come up against better teams, they've struggled a little bit more. So I don't think we learned all that much from the Bayern-Benfica game. But shout out to Bayern, big 3 points. Barcelona smashed Red Star Belgrade's Fener Zvezda in Belgrade.
He smashed up his face by the looks of things.
He did smash up his face. I mean, look, it's a tough place
terrible.
to go.
Mate, it looks like he's been in a car crash, the poor bloke.
Yeah, I mean, Kai Havertz had one of these as well. But
yeah, he did have a massive cut on his head, yeah.
Look, I mean, I don't think there's loads to learn about this, apart from Barcelona's attack is really lovely. I love the diversity of it and the diversity of their attacking structures. Like, they can pull you apart with the ball. They can pass you to death. They can go over the top of you and go long. They can score from set pieces, and that's what they do to open the scoring here. The ball in from Rafinha is heaven sent. But the header is exquisite. Someone said to me,
by the way, when we did our Superstars episode, someone said, why is Rafinha not in the list? He should be in there instead of Ronaldo. I was like, no.
Feels a bit of a stretch right now. I mean, maybe in a year's time we can have that conversation, but I think right now that feels like a wee bit of a stretch. But yeah, Barcelona can punish you in so many different ways. And there were a couple of interesting things about this game. Lewandowski misses an absolute sitter at one point. I mean, he still scores twice, but he misses an absolute sitter at one point and then scores 10 seconds after it. And you're like, oh, he's in that mindset. He's in that mindset where, like, he'll miss one and it'll be gone. It's gone, finished. I'll do it again in a second. And he does. 25 seconds later, he puts the ball in the back of the net and you're like, okay, cool. Rafinha scores a great goal. Firmino scores a nice goal. I really hope it's given to him because it takes deflection on the way in. But my other thought was that I thought Frankie de Jong being given the armband was interesting. Now, I don't have the depth on this, but it's almost as if, Rafinha wearing it earlier in the season, it's almost as if Flick likes to give that responsibility to a player that he really likes, but maybe isn't quite feeling the love from everywhere, and kind of bestows it upon them to show his faith. De Jong was really good here as well. I thought he kept things ticking really nicely, a few silky touches to beat the press, move Barcelona up the pitch. But maybe that captain's armband is one to keep an eye on for the rest of the season, because it's being handed around a fair bit. And there are obvious players in there. Lewandowski wore it a fair bit under Xavi, right? Yeah. He doesn't seem to be giving it. I think he's almost like, you're a leader. You don't need an armband to show you, but I'm going to show some faith to other players. So maybe I'm overthinking it, but I thought it was interesting. Atalanta won 2-0 away at Stuttgart. Now, Sharda Ketelara is so good. He comes on at halftime in here, and within 15 seconds, he's ghosted around the defence and put in a cross for Lookman to open the score. It's an absolutely glorious moment of football. And Gasperini's ability to change a game with a substitution is almost second to none. He just has that magic touch. Great run in to finish it from Lookman as well. I mean, he's the absolute business, and we know that. But even with that kind of tiff at the start of the season, him being back in here is amazing. And just him doing his thing on this stage over and over again, incredible. Big for Nicolo Zaniolo to get a goal as well, his first goal since coming back to Italy with Atalanta on loan. But my kind of takeaway is that Atalanta's defence won't get enough credit for what they're doing. They are another one yet to concede in this competition. And Isaac Hien at the heart of this back three is absolutely sensational. I thought this last year when they were playing in the Europa League, and a couple of good performances. He's moved to Atalanta from Hellas Verona, I believe, and kind of moved at the start of last season. And I was like, I really like that guy. He puts in a good performance every time I watch him. I was like, but maybe I've just caught him on a few lucky days.
Yeah.
No, I haven't. He's a sublime footballer. And he really, really does marshal this back three really well. He puts his body on the line for things. He is a really, really good technical player as well. There's a real player in Isaac Hien. So another Swede as a superstar. It's always good to see.
In the up.
I mean, they've now got Gyökeres and Isak up front and Isaac Hien at the back. Like, that team might be qualifying for some things soon. But yeah,
Bergvall in midfield.
Yeah. Well, good side. Good side, Sweden these days. RB Salzburg won a game, Dean. They won 3-1 at Feyenoord. Now, Salzburg have been dreadful at home and abroad. They're currently fourth in the Austrian Bundesliga, which sounds okay. It's not okay. Salzburg do not finish fourth in the Austrian Bundesliga. Nobody in the division has conceded more goals than them. They drew at the weekend with a newly promoted side, and yet they rock up at the Kuip with an incredibly young side. I think the average age was 24 of this side.
Wow.
And they pull this off. It wasn't the most exciting game in the world until the last 10, 15 minutes or so. But it jumped into life with a second Karim Konate goal. He's been kind of bright spark in quite a poor season for them. He's a really, really good footballer and the next hot striker off the Salzburg production line. He should have had a hat-trick. He smashed a penalty off the bar. But there was a really, really harsh red card for Feyenoord. One of the best goals you'll see today. So Feyenoord are 2-0 down at this point. They've just had a man sent off. It gets lumped up long. And Anis Hadj Moussa, who I think is Algerian, that plucks the ball out of the air, flicks it over a player and volleys it in from an absolutely ridiculous angle. And you're like, hang on, what? What's just happened there? But anyway, Feyenoord tried to make a game of it. Then Konate misses this penalty and you're like, oh, wow, this ending could be unbelievable. But a minute later, Salzburg get the ball on the edge of the box and Daoud Guindo unleashes an absolute thunderbolt from about 25 yards to seal the deal and pick up Salzburg's first point. That Pep Linders needed it, even with this younger squad, and the fact that they are in a bit of transition. He was under some real pressure. So This is a big, big result for Salzburg, who jump above Leipzig in the pecking order in the Champions League. So who knows? He can point to that now and be like, we haven't sacked Marco Rosa. They're like, Marco Rosa's second in the Bundesliga, mate. He's like, well, I'm above him in the Champions League, so let's see what's happening. But yeah, good from Salzburg.
That's an interesting twist, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Sparta Prague lost 2-1 at home to Brest. Brest are at it again, mate. 3 wins from 4. Right. They're fourth in the table at the halfway mark. This isn't their first Champions League. It's their first ever time in Europe. Europe is absolutely wild stuff. And add to that their home games aren't even at home. They're playing in Guingamp because then their stadium isn't UEFA certified. They weren't great here. They didn't quite dominate in the way that they did in Salzburg a few weeks back. Their second goal is an absolute gift from the Sparta Prague goalkeeper, but they won't mind. The Pirates are sailing. They are pillaging everywhere they go. I'm on board. Hoist the colours, pass the rum.
You had that pre-planned, didn't you?
I did have that one pre-planned. I'm doing most of these off the cuff, but that one was pre-planned. And finally, to wrap it all up, Shakhtar Donetsk won 2-1 against Young Boys. Not loads to report from this game. Neither of these teams are going to be going deep in this competition, but from Shakhtar perspective, another absolute corker of a goal from Georgi Sudikov. Now, he sets up the first and then scores the winner. He just drifts around like 3 players and unleashes really like a drilled shot from the edge of the box. It's an absolute beauty. And he is the absolute undisputed superstar of this team. He carries so much of the creative load for this Shakhtar unit. And I love that he's stuck with his club in what's clearly like an incredibly difficult time for them and for Ukrainian football. He's such a gorgeous player to watch when he's in full flight. There's obviously interest from a lot of places in Sudikov, but there's that emotional hold, I think, on him a little bit. And Shakhtar aren't great, but they have Sudakov, and that always gives them a puncher's chance. He creates one, scores the other here. He's a really, really special footballer. And maybe, a move to a super club isn't on the horizon. And maybe actually his career gets spent at Shakhtar in this really difficult period. And you know what? There's kind of romance in both of those. And I can appreciate them because maybe it's the financial relief that the club needs at this moment. Or maybe they get a player for the entirety of his career or the prime of his career who just brings so much joy and light to this team. He is just a gorgeous player to watch, and I love watching him.
Yeah, he's only 22 now, so there's still plenty of time. I've been writing about him, I reckon, since he was about 18 or 19. So they've done well to keep him this long. There was a lot of feeling he'd be gone by now. So let's see how long he does remain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of easy on that one either way. But we have run on longer than usual. There were a lot of storylines to get through in this week's Champions League. So we're going to wrap it there. All that's left for me to do is say thank you very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Oh, cheers, mate. Well done today.
Thank you. I've been Jack Collins. This has been Champions League Takeaway on Ranks FC. Thank you so much for listening as ever. And we will see you later on in the week. Take it easy, gang. Peace.
Is shopping for health coverage confusing? Georgia's got you covered. Georgia Access is our state's program for all residents to find quality, affordable health insurance. At georgiaaccess.gov, you can explore a variety of plan options. You may even qualify for no-cost coverage. Open enrollment is happening now. Visit georgiaaccess.gov today. Georgia Access. Health insurance the Georgia way.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely. And parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/podcast.